Cottage used to be used for dock workers.
Dock workers.
So it was dock workers.
Yes.
And made from bits left over from ships, isn't it? It was up there like that.
It's a bit of a myth, but I have seen up in the attic,
Yep.
you could just can't really get up there. Put the camera up, and I did see property of Sheerness docks written like that on one of the great big beams. Yes. And also the way the cupboards are built is very much like on ships.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll better go and find my.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's an old dock worker's cottage.
Yeah.
You might notice it's all built of wood.
Yeah.
You probably saw the side wall out there, that's all wooden.
Yeah.
This whole street was full of these little wooden houses, and on the other side.
Yeah.
Now there's only 3 left.
Wow.
The only bit that's brick is the fireplace, which is just fortunate really that they didn't build that out of wood as well.
It is. It is.
It was built in around about the 1820s or 30s.
Yeah.
1824, 28, we're not terribly sure. Some of it was probably wood that they purloined from the docks,
Yes.
from the building of the ships.
Yeah.
I have looked up in the loft, put my camera up and took a picture, and I did see property of Sheerness docks on one of the great big beams. Yes.
So it's pretty clear where that came from.
It's pretty clear, yes. Great big sewing machine there,
It's huge, isn't it?
which was used by, when you go in that room, I'll show you in that room, there's a picture of Miss and Mrs Kicks, William Kicks and Mary Ann Kicks, who lived here.
Yeah.
Mary Ann Kicks worked down at the docks and worked on either that sewing machine or one exactly the same.
Yeah.
They were run, I think, by a belt going up to the ceiling, because it's not like
true.
a pedal
I've
one.
never seen one that big.
No,
It's little
it was
pulley here
used
that we've
for
got now.
sails and flags and all the heavy stuff, canvas
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything.
Yeah. It's a beauty.
Yes, if you can, if you want, do a thing where you go around and look for things and answer questions. We do that for children, but if you want to, you can, but
That's
you
okay.
don't have to.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
And when when you have the chance to have a little look through the
Oh, absolutely. We'll do
leaflet.
that for sure.
Yes.
For certain sure.
where are you
I was
sure?
special occasions.
Yes. And then there's the scullery at the back
At
you
the
walk
back,
through, and then
yeah.
upstairs in the room above here it's the gallery where we have different exhibitions. At the moment it's paintings of the old figurheads,
Oh, yes.
which one of the volunteers from here has done.
Yeah.
And above that there is the nursery with lots of children's things, and above there is we call it the ladies' boudoir.
Okay.
And it's a sort of ladies,
Room.
or probably like the young lady of the family.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It's got stuff in there and suffragette stuff,
Yes.
things like
Very
that.
good.
Interesting.
And my
She
memory,
always remembers coming here for the, what do they call them?
crackling.
Yeah.
Crackling, yes,
Yeah.
bags of crackling, yes, I
Yeah.
used to get that
When
as
she'd
well.
been to guides, she'd come and get
Yeah.
6
That's right. Well, we used to, because we used to go to the Boy Scouts in the hall over there.
All right.
Church Hall.
Yes, well, I expect she went to guides there.
Exactly, probably, and then walk across here for your crackling.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Amazing.
Yes, that's
And
true.
there's lots of pictures along that corridor of old Sheerness and
Yeah.
old Sheppy.
That's good.
Hello, dear.
Swampies.
Yeah.
Okay, I now live in Laysdown. I'm a city-born boy by birth, so lived in Laysdown for 10, 12 years. So I'm only an apprentice Swampy, but welcome nonetheless. First thing I draw your attention to is last Saturday was the 13th of August, and on the 13th of August 1940 there was an air raid on RAF Eastchurch. And it was what the Luftwaffe regards as officially the first day of the Battle of Britain, whereas we regard the 10th of July as officially the first day of the Battle of Britain. And there were 1,000 RAF, some WAFs, some Royal Engineers, some East Surrey Regiment on guard duty, some civilian instructors getting up for breakfast, 7 o'clock in the morning. 30 DO-17s, Dornier 17s appeared, bombed the hell out of the place, managed to kill 12 RAF, 2 East Surreys, and then 4 Royal Engineers from a UXB a few days later. And it was the first of about 15 raids on the airfield. So, with that thought in mind, so 82 years ago precisely last Saturday, let's go and have a wander around. Right. For all of you that came from off the island, glad to see you made safe passage from England this morning. We're going to go and see the Frank McLean. This is Frank McLean, Sir Frank, he later became, and he is posed as he would, as he appears on the front cover of his autobiography, at the controls of a Wright Flyer, and he's known as the father of the father of naval aviation. He later became an officer in the Royal Naval Air Service, and but his main claim to fame, and why we're interested in him, is that, if you're familiar with the phrase, he bought the farm. There was a farm here called Stone Pits Farm. And as you may know, Sheppy is a big lump of London clay, and it's got outbreaks of green sandstone that come to the surface every so often, and they used to dig these out for chippings for road surfacing. So bear in mind Frank McLean, and we'll go just round the corner here. You will see that our memorial garden is a work in progress. Railway workings are by St Cottage, who train building trades. So this is where they play at, I should say rehearse, laying tracks. Very well. The reason I brought you here is, if you turn round, just to the south of our camouflage building, which is the extension that we're building for the museum, just to the south there would have been where Stone Pits Farm house stood. And Stone Pits Farm was called Stone Pits because there was a big pit out of which they dug the stones, green sandstone, for road surfacing, and I and some of the party are standing in it. It would have run up to this cement line, down to the corner there, back up again. And in 1909, when Frank McLean bought Stone Pits Farm, this would have been a big open pit. And in 1909, every time you use an aircraft, you're most likely to damage it. It's going to come to a sudden halt in one form or another. So beneath my feet are probably the wooden canvas will have gone, but the nuts, bolts, screws, levers, engine parts. So if you know anybody with deep ground penetrating radar, do please let me know. Station building for a branch line that comes in from the Sheppey Light Railway. We're on the road side of it. We'll go round the back and onto the rail side, come over to this fence, because I warn you, I'm going to ask you a trick question. And the trick question is, you can just see a hazy line of silver running from left to right. That's the southern shore of Sheppey. And I'm going to ask you, how far do you think we are from the River Swale? Yeah?
That and a bit more.
3 miles.
Yeah.
3 miles?
3 miles.
Anybody else?
4 miles.
4 miles. Okay. The correct answer is 250 miles, because the River Swale runs through North Yorkshire. That is the swale,
Yes, not the
saline
river swale.
throughout,
Yeah.
tidal throughout, has no rising point. It's a branch of the sea,
Yes.
not a river.
Yeah.
Even though there is one issue of Ordnance Survey that calls it the river swale, it's not a river.
Very good.
Far more important is over here, these buildings that you can see in the distance with the green fence round them, and they are 1912 repair hangars built for the Royal Naval Air Service, and I am desperate to get my hands on them because they're standing empty at the moment. And what I want to do is turn the first two into a paying museum, because you can see the first two, the roofs are on, but the doors and windows are void at the moment. So they're full of rats, cats and pigeons. And then the further pair, you can see the roof is breached. What we want to do is to take those, strip them back to their chassis, to the framework, and then restore them back to 1912 hangar status, which would give us the chance to give the boys on the hill some jobs in engineering, in tourism, in catering. So that's our objective. Move on before we get to the Estates Department of the Ministry of Justice. I said that this building was the station building for the branch line. I'm standing on the platform bit, you're standing where the rails would have run. The rails would have gone up to about where the yellow canopied building is. The building also served as the munitions store for the early airfield. And these things, which look interesting, don't they? They look as if they could be gun platforms. They're actually 1960s silo bases. Right, the reason I brought you here is up on top of the hill, you see a big building with a green roof. That's a water tower. Just below it, it's difficult to see in today's conditions, but there is a round building close to the ground with a long slit in it. And that was the original 1913 command centre. So Eastchurch can claim to be the only established airfield in the country with its control tower underground. The big red brick buildings are A and B wing of the open prison. Then the white buildings, which are closer to us, are circa 1920s, 1930s RAF buildings. Now, you may remember when I started to tell you about the place, I mentioned the 13th of August 1940. It was the day of Aldertag, or Eagle Day. Luftwaffe arrived 7 o'clock in the morning, bomb all the wooden billets which were on the hill then, turn and strafe all these buildings. And if you look over there, you can see the strafe marks running up the building. So they're 20mm cannon impacts. And fortunately the building survived, particularly because it was an ammunition store at the time. Difficult. You can see that they run right up and took out the top window. There has been more than one occasion when I've had to stop the prison filling in the holes. Talking about, if I was to talk about Orville and Wilbur Wright.
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes.
So the two Americans credited with inventing the aeroplane in 1903. Would it surprise you to know that Orville and Wilbur Wright visited Sheppey?
No.
Okay. This photograph.
Only because we've read the book.
This photograph taken in 1909, and everybody in the photograph is concerned with or connected to early British pioneer aviation, except this guy. He's Mr. Andrews, and the only reason he's in the photograph is because he owns the building. And the building is Muswell Manor, down at Laysdown. Orville and Wilbur Wright. Charlie Rolls, as in Rolls Royce, J.T. Seymour Brabazon, the three Short brothers, Horace with the big head, and ask me why he had a big head in a moment, Frank McLean, Hedges Butler, Dr. Lockyer,
and one of the English Wright brothers not related to the two Americans. And the reason for the photograph is to commemorate the fact that Hedges Butler, who is the Wright's English patent agent, has persuaded them to give license for the 3 shorts to build the first 6 Wright flyers in the UK. So, what the shorts do is set up a factory, and if we come up here a bit,
again, it's a conservation area where they should be fishing.
if you look at this illustration, which is repeated pretty much there, where the white mark is pretty much where we are standing at the moment. This building built 1923, and that's Stone Pit's farmhouse that Frank McLean bought. So you are standing on the site of the first aircraft factory, certainly in the UK and probably on the planet. First commercial flight ever. Again, J.T. Seymour Brabazon puts a wicker waste paper basket on his plane and puts a piglet in it. Takes it for a flight. Piglet is called Icarus II, and for many years I had thought that the piglet survived the flight but ended up as everybody's dinner that day. Until about 3 months ago, somebody walked through the door with a press cutting from the Daily Mirror for the next day, and with it was a picture of the local farmer, a Mr. Park, taking the piglet home over his shoulder as a pet.
Oh, that's nice.
So, if I can show you this, this is the Wright flyer as designed by the brothers in 1903, and it's going in that direction.
That's interesting.
Whichever brother is flying it is lying down on the lower wing, one to counterbalance the weight of the engine. In his hands he's got control of the elevator for up and down, his feet control the fin for left and right, and what cracked it for the Americans was he's lying in what they called a saddle, and by moving his hips he can warp the wings, and what that does is give control in the turn. So you've now for the first time got an aircraft that will go where you point it rather than just being blown about by the local winds. You'll have an opportunity to wander around on your own a little later, so if there's anything I've said that you've got questions on, please do come and ask me or by 2 volunteers.
Why's he got such a big head?
Oh yeah, right, Horace's head. The story goes that he was dropped on his head as a baby, and he developed a condition called hydrocephalus, which is more commonly known as water on the brain. And we know what's good for water on the brain, don't we?
Tap on the head.
Who said it? Yeah, well done. A tap on the head. But he was a mechanical genius. He'd been to France in 1908 and he'd flown with the Wrights at Pau, near Le Mans. And he had an inkling that the contract might come up for the 6 Wright flyers. And he asked them for technical drawings. And they said, well, we don't have any, we've simply made it up as we've gone along. So he measured the aircraft, he sketched it, and one of the pages of his sketchbook is just at the bottom of that display there. And he came home to Parsonage Farm, which is just up the road here, before the roundabout, and he drew technical drawings from memory. So, mechanical genius. He then gets his hands on the design of the Wright flyer, and one of the first things he does is put an upright seat in it. So now you've got control to hand and feet. The next thing he does, because he's got a much better, more powerful engine available to him, is put wheels on the bottom. So you can now get the thing off the ground from a standing start, rather than using the acceleration system that the Wright brothers had invented, the scale of this is wrong. Either the aircraft should be much bigger or this should be much smaller. But it's effectively a half-ton weight. The aircraft sits on the dolly. When the pilot is satisfied that he's got the engine running and the props turning, kicks a catch, it drops the weight and it accelerates the aircraft up to about 30 knots, which will hopefully, with the props turning, provide enough thrust to get the thing going. I mean, often it didn't. The disadvantage of this is that it takes 2 hours to set up. It's got to be set up into wind, and within those 2 hours the wind direction can change, which is why Horace wasn't happy with it and wanted to change the system. So, we come round here.
Yeah, that's so funny. We were talking my grandchildren. We've got 2 grandchildren, and the older one, Sophie, got 21 this year.
So this brings us up to the Second World War. There's a map of the airfield in the 1940s. 700 acres, always a grass field. There are 3 prisons on site now. One is Stanford Hill Open Prison, which stands about there. You've got Elmley, which is category A, and Remand stands there, and Swaleside stands about there. But there's the branch line coming in from the Sheppy Light Railway. The building that we're standing in is marked, it's just there.
Yeah.
Then, returning to the 13th of August 1940, the Aldertag raid. This painting was donated fairly recently. That's Warden Point. That's the sands at Laysdown. That's RAF Laysdown, of which there's a model just behind you 2 ladies there that you can have a look at later. And then on the point is where the big picture was taken, Muswell Manor. In this picture, Dornier DO-17 is being seen off by Hurricanes of 151 Squadron. Okay, we come round here.
The Americans shot sort of back to Texas. They shot it about 35 miles up into the air, and from one produced the first pictures of the Earth from space.
So many people ask, why was Sheppy chosen by the early fixed-wing pioneers? And the answer is that most of them had been balloonists, most of them flying coal gas filled balloons from southeast London with a prevailing westerly wind. So they would have known from their balloon Sheppy as relatively round, relatively flat, relatively green, surrounded by water, line of sight navigation. If you don't stop on Sheppy, your next stop is Norway. Belgium if you're lucky, if the wind's in the right direction. So they would have known Sheppy. The main agriculture of the island is, the main economy of the island is agriculture, and that's becoming more technical, so there's workforce available. Good communications. Got the Sheppy Light Railway running down the spine of the island. You can get from Queenborough from Victoria to Queenborough by Steam Express in 59 minutes, which is better than today's service. You've got every possible skill you could need up in Sheerness Dockyard, shipwrights, carpenters, blacksmiths, riggers, whatever, and they're under military discipline. And we're only 50 miles from London. That's why Sheppy was chosen. Why, you might ask, has Sheppy not got a better reputation or is more widely known as the start of British aviation? And the answer to that, I believe, is that this was the place where the technical development was done. Places like Brooklands and Latham's Plain, and Salisbury Plain, were where the rich guys played at the sport of aviation. This is where the Short brothers developed aircraft and went on to design many different kinds of the first aircraft to serve on aircraft carriers with folding wings. I mean, just so many firsts in British aviation were enacted or thought of here. So, that's the lightning tour. Anybody got any questions? Either me or Jim or Jerry can hopefully answer them for you. The exhibition starts over by the big picture and wanders up and down the aisles. So I will leave you to wander to your heart's content.
Excellent.
Okay. Dating from 1908, actually, when Charlie Rolls was practicing with a glider, pushing it off Stamford Hill. Right through to the First World War, through the First World War, between the wars, right up to the end of the Second World War, 1947, say. Then the RAF said, we have no further need of the airfield. Lots of wooden billet accommodation. So the Home Office said, we will house returning civil servants from the independence of India and Pakistan. Up until 1950, they saw that that worked and turned it into the second open prison in the UK.
When you say open prison, what do you
Yeah.
mean? Can they just walk out any time they want?
No, they would be under license. It's mostly guys coming to the end. It's a male prison. It's mostly guys coming to the end of their sentences who have been good boys and either had their sentences reduced or simply coming towards the end, coming towards release. And part of our ethic here in Eastchurch Aviation Museum is to attempt to reduce reoffending by giving them jobs as volunteers. Our two volunteers this morning are not, they are civilian volunteers, not offenders. But you will see offenders wandering about, but they are under control. They will need to be licensed to be out in the open. Whereas Elmley, which is Series A and Remand, and the other one are banged up to rights 24/7.
I didn't. Sorry again. First time I ever come down here, I didn't realise so many people lived so close to the prisons.
Right.
But I was totally gobsmacked that
Yeah.
people lived
There's
that close.
There's bits of the RAF structure which are fairly well hidden. As you come down towards the gatehouse for this prison, this open prison, there is a set of buildings which locally are called Coronation Street, and they were mainly WAF establishment, Women's Royal Air Force. You can't see them from the road very well because they're hidden behind trees. Otherwise, these buildings are, and the big brick building and the 1912 hangars are pretty much all that's left.
So did they build the houses for people working here?
Yeah.
And
How's-
it's just grown from that?
Yeah, it started 1910 when the early aviators moved up here from Laysdown, and then the buildings were built. One we're in 1923, the big yellow brick building 1917, 1923, 1930s for some of the white buildings we saw.
I believe the houses, the people that lived at Eastchurch, are the ones that lived the other side of the roundabout, because I didn't realise so many people lived this side of the roundabout.
Right, the other side of the roundabout would be regarded as in the parish of Eastchurch, not to do with the prisons.
Oh.
The RAF station started, as you come off the roundabout and come down towards the prison, if you look over to your right, there is a 16th century farmhouse. That's Parsonage Farm. That's where Horace Short lived. He died there in 1917, aged 47. And in a corner of the field, you can, if you know where you're looking, see one of the P8 pillboxes still standing. You can see another one just on the corner here. So that's the start of the airfield.
I always wondered why Eastchurch was split into two.
Eastchurch is the village and has been around since Anglo-Saxon times, which is a bit early for the RAF.
Thank you.
Where you can see the big tea room there, it used to be our warehouse, and the back bit that is now the music hall, we used to have bathroom and bedroom displays. Then we were asked by a history group if they could show a short film that somebody had made as a hobby of Bluetown. It was just a half-hour black and white documentary film. They'd just taken photographs and made them into an animation, so you could actually see it if you're walking through Bluetown. So we expected about 10 people. I rashly said I'll make teas and coffees for everyone, and 100 turned up.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking, okay, what's the interest in Bluetown? And then we were asked to do it again and again. In the meantime, I started researching about it, and this place is just amazing. The amount of history that is in here, and our island, it just does not get recognised, the heritage that it's got. So then the docks have restored the figureheads. I don't know if you saw the portier just there, and there's another one just around the corner, Scylla. And they had nowhere to put them, so I said, would you like the figureheads? So the figureheads were now in amongst the bathroom displays. You'll get used to this, nothing is planned here at all. And then people started bringing bits and pieces in, and I sort of had like a mini heritage centre in amongst the bathrooms and bedrooms. Then unfortunately my husband took ill and we had to downsize and close the business. So I came up with this plan that if he'd been all right, he wouldn't have let me do. But so I converted the offices upstairs into an apartment, rented out some of the space. I just retired and I thought I'll have a little hobby of a heritage centre and try to promote Sheppey's history. Well, 13 years on, we discovered also quite early on that the actual building had been a music hall. The front bit had been a hotel, and on the 5th of June 1917, 23 Gotha planes came over, one of the first raids ever, and they blew, well, they were aiming for the dockyard and missed, and they got our building. If you look carefully when you go back to your minibus, you'll see the holes in the wall, and there's some shrapnel marks from that air raid. But does this ever get mentioned at all when they're talking about World War I history? That one of the first air raids ever, and there were 23 planes that came over to the dockyard. That's how important our dockyard is. So when you start finding out all this history, you're thinking, why doesn't anyone know about it? Then you discover that Sheppey's history hadn't been taught in the schools for at least 2 decades. So it's no wonder that parents can't tell their children because they don't know about it. In its heyday, 7,000 people lived in Bluetown. Now there's about 100. The reason they lived here is because of the dockyard. And the reason we had a dockyard is because the Dutch invaded in 1667. And they took the little fort that was at Sheerness, then they went over to Queenborough, they captured Queenborough, and then they forgot about it and didn't hand it back to the 1960s. So we were Dutch and we didn't know it for quite a long time. But our island is just a lump of clay. So they had tried to build dockyards in the past, but they'd flooded. But now they realised that they had to have some fortification here, otherwise people could go up to the Thames which the Dutch did, and captured a ship from Chatham, which is now still in one of the museums in Amsterdam, where the back of it is Prince Charles. So you start finding all this history and you're thinking, what can we do with it? Then people started bringing bits and pieces in, and then my job was to try and make some sense of it all. We now have a museum over 3 floors. We've restored the music hall. It's one of the few music halls in the country. It's an authentic music hall. You get other places like Brick Lane that do music hall, but it's in a converted church. So the British Music Hall Society support us. In fact, in the autumn, we've got a proper music hall show on for 2 weeks. Heritage doesn't pay the bills. It's fantastic and it's a great hobby, and we've got about 25 volunteers, all passionate about telling Sheppey's history. And so to keep that going, we have to put on shows. So hence the music hall show. And do any of you listen to Radio Kent at all? Paul Harris, did you ever? He used to be on Radio Kent for years with Paul James. So when I first found out about the music hall, someone introduced me to him because he'd started life in a music hall, and he helped me. So our stage is the same size as the Leeds Variety, and he put on music hall shows for us for quite a few years before he retired. So music hall shows we do, other seasonal shows. When you go into the music hall, you see it's all laid up because we've got a coach party of 38 in tomorrow. So they will have, one of our guides will get on their coach, take them around the island. They'll look around the museum, they'll have a film, and they'll have, I think they've got ploughmans tomorrow. And that's what we do, get lots of coaches in. The seasonal shows, we get 2 coaches a day. How they find out about us, I don't know. But I mean, the group next week, I was just saying to Phil, are coming from Upminster. So we get them from regularly from Epsom every year. We get them from Guildford. Once they come back every year for a different show. We then became the community cinema. It used to be at the Healthy Living Centre, and it was in the sports hall, and people didn't like sitting and watching the film in there, so we were offered it. At that point, we hadn't got tables and chairs in there or anything at all. It was just a mixed match. I was the projectionist, I sold the ice creams, I sold the tickets, you name it, I did it. And sometimes it was colder in there than it was outside, but still people came. We now have a film every Friday. People join to become a friend of the centre, and they get free film every Friday.
When you said film, a modern film or an old?
A mixture of old and new. So the only way, we can't advertise the films unless you become a member, because that's the only way we can get the licence to make it free for everyone. But yeah, if I tell you that we've got the new Downton Abbey coming up, we've got The Duke, we've got Operation Mincemeat, and in the summer holidays we're doing children's films. So try to get families in. But we also do streamings, so we, like in the other cinemas, so we've got the Andre Roux streamings, we do them twice a year. And we've just been given the Westlife concert, so that's going to come on the 17th of September. So all sorts of things going here. So we have a monthly history talk, we have a monthly quiz, we have Showtime, where we stream West End shows that have been filmed in here. So I think we've got the Buddy Holly story this month. So there's all sorts of things go on here. We have a ukulele club. Someone asks us, can we do something? We tend to say yes and then work out how we're going to do it, and that's how it goes. We have a dementia film club. What else do we do here? Knit and Natter group. We're going to start in October a film with a book club. So instead of just being a book club, you watch the film as well, then you can have the discussion about, did the film match up to the book and stuff like that. And we're going to do a well-being group. So it's going to be a bit different from a normal well-being group, because that's what we do. So it will be a bit of health talk and stuff, and the exercises will be cheerleading with pom-poms and belly dancing and taster sessions and all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah, so lots of things go on here. So it's a community hub, it's a museum, it's a theatre, it's a cinema, and it could be whatever anyone else comes up with the idea for it. As I say, we only have 2 paid staff, the rest of us are all volunteers. We have all the schools here, we have all the care homes come in. Saturday, if you've been here, we had a senior school disco. So you had school dinners, and then we put music on. I was the headmistress, and we had top bags, and yeah, it was.
So you go all in.
You've got to have some fun when you're retired, haven't you? Otherwise, we're volunteers, so if you're not enjoying it, what you're doing it for. So when you're ready and relaxed, I'll take you for a tour around the building, and then I'll leave you to mooch on your own, because there's a lot to read, a lot to take in, because it's a big old building.
Can I have a bit more information on the knit and natter, please?
Knit and natter on a Friday morning, they just come and they sit in the tea room and they just knit and natter. Okay, so we're talking about the co-op. If you want to go in there, there's a co-op shop, turn of the century. Now just point you, just briefly tell you things, and then you can have a quick mooch on your own.
Keep moving on with us.
So, as I mentioned, 1816 the co-op started. We found out about it because you can see the centenary book up there. Someone brought that in and we started looking into it. Then we had a school party and the little boy went home, told his granddad, and he said, I saved all the ledgers from the co-op when they were knocking it down.
Oh.
So if you look behind you, you've got original ledgers.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And all these other bits and pieces, and 2 of our volunteers put this together, and another volunteer wrote the book. So
Very nice.
Beautiful.
in here we have a schoolroom. And there's a Sunday school there, so we've got a schoolroom and a Sunday school. All of this furniture came from Halfway School when they closed down. And that big throne there, that came from Danley School when it closed down. But it was, first off, it started off in the girls' tech school. And if you look very carefully, you can see there's a mouse on the top of it. It's a mouseman. So we don't know what would have happened to all of this stuff if we weren't here. So I'll show you along, as I say, I'm just going to show you and then you can mooch. Yeah. So this is our research room. We do family history workshops here. 2 of our volunteers, you can book a slot on a Friday and they will help you through your family history. But also we've got lots of books. Again, people have donated their own research, and so it just grows and grows.
Yeah. Be interesting to sit and look at them.
But we have to fundraise to get computers and all of this. Yeah, just be careful as you come out of there. So that's what our building looked like before it was bombed. That's what the stage looked like again before. That's the old Bluetown there. And this is a model my husband made of the Gotha planes that came over, say 23 of them came over and bombed us. There's your permit books, your passports. And then we've got a 1940s house here. So this is the same size of a typical house in Bluetown. Can go in if you want. But as I say, have a mooch later on. So and then this is a yard with an outside loo. And on the back there we've got the history of how to wipe your bottom. School children love that.
Yeah.
Squares of newspaper with a bit of
There you
strength
go,
in
you've
the
got
corner.
newspaper,
Oh, you've got it, there it is,
yeah,
yes.
you've got the eyes all.
Been there, done
We've
that.
got that.
Horrible stuff.
It's all right. You'll have to duck as you come through here and hold this door. All right. You've got a home guards office.
Yep, yep.
And then we're going to go up the stairs.
This is where the air raid warden would have sat.
Yeah.
What should we take now? 'Cause you must-
Going through the lifeboat here.
There's a story behind everything. So we didn't know we had these beams until the ceiling fell down. And then I thought, well, do you know these beams must have come from a ship? And also this is where Sheerness was where he picked up his first ship and where he came in the barrel of brandy after the Battle of Trafalgar. So my husband is very patient with me when I say, do you know what, could I have it laid out like the deck of the Victory? So you've got a captain's cabin in there, you've got what life is like at sea. Somebody was talking about...
Sorry to interrupt. What part of the building are we actually in now?
We're at the top.
Yeah, so this isn't the theatre or cinema or anything like that. No, that's something right. Sorry, I'm just trying to orientate myself.
So this
in the
would
loft,
have just been
basically.
bedrooms in. This would have just been bedrooms.
This would have been our storerooms up here.
Ah,
Yeah.
Our offices used to be at the back, that's now our apartment. And yeah, you'll see some people, it was nothing,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing. But then when you get given all this stuff, where do you put it?
Yeah.
So when I was saying to somebody what I'd like to do is to make it like the deck of the Victory, they said, well, I'll make you a cannon. So I'm thinking a cannon about that big. And he goes, no, I'm coming in convoy. So it's a life-size replica of a cannon from the Victory.
Oh, it's a replica, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Fiberglass.
yeah.
But we did rescue a real cannon. When the steel mill closed down, the security guards phoned up and they said, Jen, you've got half an hour to get anything that you want. So I went in, I got the architect's model of the steel mill.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, people wouldn't ever really it's gone. And we saved a cannon called Blackie that was, well, actually it was purloined by apprentices in the 1970s. And it was part of people's apprenticeship to look after this cannon, so people asked if we could rescue it.
Yeah.
We tried getting a real cannon over the road into a yard. We got nowhere to put it, so it was in one of the yards around the corner there. And that's how things come to us.
But you still got it? The cannon?
It's in one of the one of the yards
Yards,
somewhere,
yeah.
yeah. So up there you've got an original World War I stretcher. That bench came from the Fountain Hotel. This model, the guy was a professional model maker, and when he died, his widow donated it to us. And then we've made a jail over there for Richard Parker. So you've also got over there the Princess Irene. So in World War I, there were two explosions that happened within a few months of each other, the Bulwark and the Irene, and nearly 1,000 people died in those two explosions. So what is now our war memorial was actually a memorial to those two explosions. Now, the Princess Irene was one of the first minesweepers. It was made by the Canadian Pacific, It didn't even have time to have its paint changed over to the Royal Navy paint. People didn't know how to load up mines, and it blew up. And the explosion was so great that a child died on the Isle of Grain from the shrapnel. And when they were going to do the centenary of it, we got involved because when they did the Bulwark a few months ago, before that, they did it in Chatham and didn't invite anyone from Sheppey, which annoyed us a bit. So we thought that we would do something. So my husband actually made that model from one photograph. There was only one photograph of the ship ever. So he scaled that up and made that for us. We had a student from the University of Kent who did a biop of everyone that died in that explosion. And then somehow or other, people found out what we were doing and they said, could they come over? Because they knew they had relatives that had died in that. So we had people that came from Canada, Australia, Tasmania, all over the UK. So then we had to get some funds to try and feed them, and then people with little boats offered to take us out to the wreck site, and then we had a memorial, and that's just how things happen here. And that is the Montgomery. So if you looked outside, you may have seen two silver pulleys. That's them. They were a bit dangerous and swinging in the wind, and the docks phoned up and they said, can we bring 2 bits of the Montgomery over for you? So that's how we've got them out there. And by the way, we've got an anchor as well, so that's why we've got those out.
Are you going to get the masts when they take them?
Good question. Very
But
good
also-
question.
Inadvertently.
Yeah,
but
we
they're
have a
about
letter.
to cut
Yeah.
the
Oh,
masts
yeah.
off
Yeah.
the Montgomery.
I think that's wrong, obviously.
So we have a letter there from the American government to say that they salvage it. So according to them, it's not there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah. Along there, you've also got a timeline of Sheppey's history. So when you come up and have your mooch, there's plenty to read and have a look at. So I'm going to take you downstairs to the music hall and then leave you to your own
How
devices.
come you've got a little garden?
Because when I moved here, I had to give up my garden, and that was just a horrible black fat roof. And so
Now
over
it's
the years,
not.
I've made it into my little garden.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Nice.
So I have my summer house,
Wow.
which,
Beautiful little hidden gem.
Yeah, it is.
so that's my little escape. So I don't let the public, but once a year we have a cocktails and canapé party for all the volunteers. So we,
Karen just said it looks like a bowling room.
yes, it's fake grass. I just hoover it up, you know. It's something really important. You'll see some anchors in Bluetown, but this is the only place in the world that anchor trials have ever taken place. The Royal Navy used to use Sheerness Dockyard to do all their experiments and trials, and prior to 1852 it was basically one shape of anchor that did everything, and they were losing anchors. So they tested anchors to see what shape would be best for what circumstances, and that's still the only time that anchor trials have taken place, when you consider that every ship has an anchor. And there used to be an anchor testing house at Sheerness Dockyard as well. So yeah, someone was asking me what my next dream is. I would like to actually have an anchor museum along Bluetown High Street with all the different shapes of anchors and figureheads and stuff. When you come down here, you'll see a handsome king at the bottom, and I'll tell you about him. So can you see William IV here? The reason we've got William IV is he never expected to become king, and he was in charge of Sheerness Dockyard. He was a sailor, and so it was a logical thing for him to be given the job of looking after that. He lived in Sheerness with his mistress, and if you go into Wetherspoons, it's called the Bell and Lion, and it's named after them. He was the lion and she was the bell. She came from a theatrical background. They had several children, but then when he died, he didn't have any legitimate heirs, so his niece took the throne, which was Victoria. But he seems to have been forgotten, yet he did an awful lot of good in his short time. His brother was extravagant, the Prince Regent, but he actually was very frugal and did lots of good things. All right, so careful as you come round the corner here, we're going right down to the bottom. So that's our lift. It took me 2 years to fundraise for. And this is the music hall. I think I'm about.
Goodness.
Wow,
That's incredible.
this is more than what I imagined.
Can you imagine this full of sailor boys?
Yeah.
And the dancing going on
Yeah.
up there and the drinking going on down here.
How long did
Incredible.
it take you to bring this back to life?
Well, we're still doing bits and pieces. We've done it all on a shoestring. But so it's 13 years from the beginning.
Do you have pictures from when you first started?
Yeah, when you go onto the middle floor by the lift area there, you can see some of the pictures of what it looked like. So everything here has a story. I mentioned that I discovered it was a music hall, and so I thought I'd like to restore a music hall, but I don't have any money. So anyone who would listen, I would say I need a grand piano and some chandeliers and bone china. So all the bone china has been donated. I don't know if you know, if you're from the island, there's an Art Deco house on the island near Minster Library. It's built in the shape of a grand piano.
Her daughter helped renovate it. She painted it.
Yeah. So we got a phone call to say they were clearing the house out and they'd left one room to the end and it was just full of newspapers from floor to ceiling. They took those away and they found the grand piano.
So that story is true. There was
Yeah.
a piano in there.
And so they said, would you like it? But it would be £300. We hadn't got that. And a customer heard the story, said, I'll buy it for you. Never met this man before in our lives. And got a piano tuner, said, can you go and check it out? And he said, you've got to get it, it's a Bechstein. He said, that's like the Rolls Royce of pianos. And then we had 3 days to get it out of the house, otherwise it would have gone to auction with the house. And so we then found a remover who had a piano shoe, and he said, I'll do it on a Sunday morning for you if you can get me 4 fit men under 40 at 9 o'clock on the Sunday morning. Now that's a challenge. So got one of my boys, and then we thought, who lifts heavy things? And we thought undertakers. And Hogbins came and helped us out. So the chandelier then was donated. So yeah, that gets played as well.
You say that you still use it?
Still use it.
Excellent.
It would cost £40,000 to get it restored. When we got it in, we looked at the little serial number. There are only 2, it was built in 1870, and there are only 2 left in the country. One's in the Royal Opera House, and the other one's here on us.
So, if you was to insure it, could you get insurance for
Oh,
it?
we have insurance for everybody. You try and get that out.
No, you can,
So you can see
couldn't
we're
replace
a
that anyway.
cinema. We have shows, talks. This room gets used a lot. I say tomorrow we've got this group coming in, and so they'll be having a tour of the island. They'll be coming in here for lunch. They'll be watching a history film, and they'll be having a talk and a tour.
We had a family birthday party.
You did, yes. And we do lots of family reunions as well, where people have traced their ancestry and then want to bring it all together. We do weddings, we do wakes, we do
When you say weddings,
golden
wedding
weddings,
receptions, or
wedding
people don't
receptions.
actually get married
We
here?
can do, one of our trustees is also a celebrant, so we can't do the legal bit, but we can have the whole shebang upstairs, sign on the captain's table, and then have your party down here. And people, well, we had a golden wedding, I think it was last year now, where they wanted to watch Mamma Mia, sing along Mamma Mia with fish and chips, because we do that quite a bit. Sheerness. And it was great because they didn't know that their daughters had rehearsed one of the songs, so they came all dressed up. Their son was a pianist, he got and played on the piano. It's just nice.
Very nice.
And we seem to specialise in 90th birthdays.
Well, that's a milestone.
So we have it all laid out. You can see on the front of the building how it all gets laid out. But as I say, Saturday it was the senior school disco.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where my cane got to.
Very diverse.
I was terrifying them all with the cane.
Oh my lord.
So, I'll leave you to mooch. All right, I'm around if you need to ask any questions.
What's the history of this dress?
Well, we did have Max Miller's costume in there, and British Musical Society wanted it back. So I had to find something quickly to put in there, and so that's my wedding dress.
Oh, that's lovely.
Absolutely stunning.
There you go.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'd like to get into it now. But...